This is an unfiltered journey through the life of Nathan Bedford Forrest. Beginning in a Tennessee cabin in 1821, rising from poverty to power, soldier to businessman, and ending with his complex legacy. We'll rely on historical sources, not modern judgment, to witness his story as it unfolded. Nathan Bedford Forrest was born July 13, 1821, in a primitive log cabin deep in the Tennessee wilderness. A world of poverty, hardship, and relentless labor. His parents, hardy pioneers of Scots, Irish, and English descent, struggled daily to survive, forging Forrest's fierce independence and ambition. In these unforgiving backwoods, strength and self-reliance were essential, qualities that would define Forrest's life. Nathan Bedford was the eldest in a large frontier family, where every child worked hard to survive. Their roots traced back to early settlers, and their days were filled with chores, hunting, and shared hardship. His mother, Miriam, was the family's anchor, teaching Bedford resilience and grit, qualities that shaped his life. In 1834, the Forrest family left Tennessee for Mississippi, seeking a better life. Tragedy struck when William Forrest died, leaving his widow and children in hardship. 16-year-old Nathan became head of the family, shouldering immense responsibility to keep them together and survive. This crucible forged his resolve and shaped the man he would become. After his father's death, young Forrest and his brothers toiled from dawn to dusk, fighting poverty in Tippah County, Mississippi. Forrest's toughness and quick temper grew, earning him a reputation for never backing down. A fierce confrontation proved he couldn't be intimidated, cementing his local legend. Through it all, his devotion to his mother remained absolute. Her strength inspired him for life. Nathan Bedford Forrest's education was brief, just 6 months in a classroom, cut short by poverty and the demands of frontier life. He became his family's provider, learning from the land, not books. Though functionally illiterate, Forrest's sharp mind and practical intelligence made him a master of business, strategy, and reading people. Nathan Bedford Forrest's early years on the harsh American frontier forged him into a man of resilience, fierce independence, and ambition. Poverty and loss fueled his drive for success and respect. The Southern Code of Honor shaped his identity, making him quick to defend his reputation. With no wealth or connections, Forrest left home, tempered by hardship, ready to seize his destiny. Nathan Bedford Forrest, having secured his family's survival in Mississippi, sought greater opportunity. In 1842, he moved to Hernando, entering business with his uncle, trading livestock, speculating in land, and running a livery stable. A violent dispute in 1845 left Forrest wounded but cemented his fearsome reputation. He defended his family, survived, and was acquitted. This event shaped Forrest's ruthless approach to business and conflict for life. By the early 1850s, Nathan Bedford Forrest left Hernando for booming Memphis, seeking fortune in the slave trade. Memphis was a hub for cotton and slavery, where Forrest built a profitable, controversial business buying and selling enslaved people. He profited from the forced separation of families, amassing wealth through human misery and the brutal system of forced labor. Nathan Bedford Forrest used profits from slave trading to build a vast fortune, investing in land, cotton plantations, and Memphis real estate. By the late 1850s, he owned thousands of acres and hundreds of enslaved people, becoming one of the South's wealthiest men. His rise from poverty was built on a brutal system soon to be shattered by war. Amidst his rising business career, Nathan Bedford Forrest married Mary Ann Montgomery in 1845, a gentle, pious woman who became his confidant and stabilizing force. Their devoted marriage lasted over 30 years, enduring tragedy and success. Mary Ann's quiet strength and faith anchored Forrest, shaping his private life amid public turmoil. By the late 1850s, Nathan Bedford Forrest had risen from frontier trader to a powerful member of the Southern planter aristocracy, owning vast cotton plantations and hundreds of enslaved people. His fortune and status were built on the cotton economy and slavery, making him a staunch defender of the Southern social order. As Nathan Bedford Forrest's wealth grew, he became a Memphis alderman in 1858, bringing business-like efficiency to city government. He championed street paving and sanitation, tackling crime directly, even leading a citizens' posse. These bold, pragmatic traits would soon define his role in the Civil War. Nathan Bedford Forrest rose from poverty to immense wealth in the antebellum South, embodying both ambition and contradiction. He was a devoted family man and ruthless businessman, building his fortune on land, cotton, and enslaved people. Forrest's influence shaped the region, and he fiercely defended the Southern system that made him powerful. On the eve of war, his ambition and decisiveness would soon find a new, terrible purpose. Lincoln's 1860 election ignited deep national division. The South saw his victory as a threat to their way of life and slavery. Tennessee was torn. West favored secession, East stayed loyal to the Union. For Nathan Bedford Forrest, war was now inevitable, and a new, dangerous chapter was about to begin. When Tennessee seceded, men rushed to enlist, swept up in patriotic fervor. Nathan Bedford Forrest, though wealthy and older than most, joined as a private, alongside his brother and son, sending a powerful message. His leadership and resources were quickly recognized, and he was soon commissioned to raise and lead a new regiment. With his new commission, Nathan Bedford Forrest returned to Memphis, recruiting rugged, self-reliant men for his Tennessee Cavalry Battalion. He drew volunteers with his reputation, seeking skilled riders and marksmen from rural areas. Soon, hundreds flocked to his banner, forming a fiercely loyal, diverse unit, bound by trust in their new commander. At the war's start, the Confederacy faced a severe shortage of modern weapons. Lieutenant Colonel Forrest, unable to arm his men, took matters into his own hands. With a hand-picked group, he traveled into Kentucky, risking everything to buy pistols and supplies with his own fortune. Forrest returned triumphant, having armed his battalion and cemented his legend as a bold, decisive leader. By fall 1861, Forrest's battalion was ready for action, joining the Confederate line in Kentucky, a crucial border state. Forrest led daring patrols deep into enemy territory, gathering intelligence and disrupting Union movements. In December, Forrest's men attacked a larger Union force near Sacramento, Kentucky, winning a stunning victory and marking his rise as a bold cavalry leader. Forrest's victory at Sacramento quickly made him a Confederate hero, praised for his boldness and leadership. In just 6 months, he rose from private to full colonel, earning command through skill, not politics. Now, as colonel, Forrest was ready for the even greater battles ahead. In early February of 1862, the fragile Confederate defensive line in the West began to crumble under a major Union offensive. Union Brigadier General Ulysses S. Grant, in a coordinated Army-Navy operation, captured Fort Henry on the Tennessee River with little resistance. Grant's next target was the much more formidable Fort Donelson, located just 12 miles away on the Cumberland River. The fall of Fort Donelson would open the heart of Tennessee to Union invasion, including the vital city of Nashville. Colonel Nathan Bedford Forrest and his cavalry regiment were ordered to the fort to help bolster its defenses, riding into a situation that was rapidly deteriorating into a strategic disaster for the Confederacy. Forrest and his men arrived at Fort Donelson to find a scene of confusion and uncertain leadership. The fort was defended by about 17,000 Confederate soldiers under the command of Brigadier General John B. Floyd, a former U.S. Secretary of War with little military competence. His subordinate commanders, Gideon Pillow and Simon Bolivar Buckner, were equally plagued by indecision and personal rivalries. As Grant's larger army of around 25,000 men began to encircle the fort, Forrest's cavalry was tasked with vital picket and scouting duty, constantly skirmishing with the advancing Union forces in the bitter winter weather of sleet and snow. During the siege, Forrest displayed his characteristic aggression and keen tactical sense. He repeatedly urged his superiors to adopt an offensive strategy, to attack a portion of Grant's encircling line before it was fully entrenched. He argued that their only hope was to break out and escape, not to be trapped and starved into surrender. His advice was largely ignored by the vacillating generals, who could not agree on a course of action. Forrest's troopers performed bravely, repelling Union probes and providing valuable intelligence, but they were part of a larger force that was being paralyzed by the incompetence of its high command. On February 15th, the Confederates finally attempted a breakout, attacking the Union right flank in an effort to open an escape route to Nashville. The initial assault was successful, with Forrest's dismounted cavalry fighting effectively and helping to push the Union forces back. They had created the opening they needed to escape. Inexplicably, however, General Pillow ordered the victorious Confederate troops to return to their trenches, surrendering the ground they had just won. This baffling decision sealed the fate of the garrison. That night, in a council of war, the Confederate generals decided that surrender was their only option, a conclusion that Forrest vehemently rejected. During the late-night council of war, as Generals Floyd and Pillow prepared to hand over command and accept Grant's terms of unconditional surrender, Forrest made his position clear. He announced that he had not brought his men to Fort Donelson to surrender them, and he would not do so. He believed that escape was still possible and declared his intention to lead his command out, regardless of the general's decision. He argued that the road they had opened earlier in the day was only lightly guarded and that a determined force could still break through. His defiance stood in stark contrast to the defeatism that had gripped the senior leadership. Finding a local man who knew the terrain intimately, Forrest confirmed that a shallow backwater of the Cumberland River known as Lick Creek was passable on horseback, though it was waist-deep with icy water. While the senior generals abdicated responsibility, Floyd and Pillow commandeered steamboats to escape personally, leaving Buckner to handle the formal surrender. Forrest prepared his own daring exodus. He gathered his entire cavalry regiment, along with any other soldiers from different units who wished to join him rather than face a Union prison camp. Several hundred infantrymen and some artillerymen chose to take their chances with the audacious cavalry colonel. In the freezing pre-dawn darkness of February 16th, Forrest led his column of about 700 men quietly out of the Confederate lines. They moved toward the icy water of Lick Creek, their horses splashing through the frigid, swampy ground. The escape was a high-risk gamble. If a strong Union force had been guarding the flooded road, Forrest's command would have been trapped and destroyed, but his intelligence and instincts proved correct. They encountered only a few scattered Union pickets who were easily brushed aside. The column successfully waded through the icy creek and reached the open road, making their way south toward safety. Forrest's escape from Fort Donelson was a remarkable feat of leadership and willpower. While the majority of the Confederate Army, nearly 13,000 men, laid down their arms in one of the Union's first great victories of the war, Forrest had saved his entire command. The incident propelled his reputation to new heights. He was hailed as a hero throughout the South, a commander who refused to accept defeat and who valued the lives of his men above the formalities of surrender. It was a defining moment that established his legend as a leader who would always find a way, who would fight or flee on his own terms, but would never, ever quit. After Fort Donelson, Forrest's regiment shielded Johnston's retreating army, skirmishing with Union pursuers and preventing disaster. At Corinth, Johnston reorganized and launched a surprise attack at Shiloh on April 6, 1862, catching Grant's army off guard. Forrest's cavalry fought fiercely on the right flank, charging, capturing prisoners, and protecting against Union gunboats. The Confederates pushed Grant's army back, but Johnston was killed, and Beauregard halted the attack, ignoring Forrest's warning to press on. Overnight, Union reinforcements arrived. The next day, Grant counterattacked, forcing a Confederate retreat. The costly Confederate counteroffensive ended in failure, with Forrest's warnings proven right. As the Confederates retreated from Shiloh, Forrest led the rearguard, shielding the army from Union pursuit. On April 8th, near Fallen Timbers, Forrest encountered Sherman's force, and true to form, charged with only a handful of men. The audacity stunned the Union troops, but Forrest found himself alone, deep in enemy lines. He was shot in the hip, but managed to grab a Union soldier as a shield and escape under fire. Forrest's reckless bravery disrupted the Union pursuit, allowing the Confederate retreat to continue. He survived his first serious wound, earning a reputation for near-suicidal courage. After recovering, Forrest returned in June 1862, frustrated by Confederate caution. He proposed and led a daring raid into Union-held Middle Tennessee, targeting supply lines. With 1,000 troopers, Forrest struck the Nashville and Chattanooga Railroad, moving swiftly and unpredictably. On his birthday, he surrounded and bluffed the Union garrison at Murfreesboro into surrender, capturing more men than he commanded. Forrest's men destroyed supplies, tore up tracks, and paralyzed Union operations for weeks. The raid revitalized Confederate morale and showcased Forrest's genius for mobile warfare. He emerged as a master of the cavalry raid, achieving outsized results with limited resources. Forrest's raids earned him the nickname Wizard of the Saddle for his uncanny ability to strike and vanish. He revolutionized cavalry tactics, using his men as mounted infantry for speed and firepower. Forrest's philosophy: get there first with the most men, using speed, surprise, and overwhelming force. He excelled at psychological warfare, bluffing and intimidating opponents into surrender. Leading from the front, Forrest inspired fierce loyalty and fear, personally sharing every danger. His innovation, cunning, and leadership made him the Civil War's most feared cavalry commander. Promoted to brigadier general, Forrest served under General Bragg, whose cautious style clashed with Forrest's aggression. During the Stones River campaign, Forrest's raids crippled Union supply lines and captured thousands. At the Battle of Stones River, Forrest's cavalry excelled, but Bragg's indecision led to a Confederate retreat. Forrest, furious at the lost opportunity, openly criticized Bragg's leadership. Their mutual animosity deepened, with Forrest resenting Bragg's caution and Bragg distrusting Forrest's independence. This conflict would soon erupt into one of the war's most famous confrontations. In spring 1863, Union Colonel Streight led 1,500 men on a raid to cut Confederate supply lines in Alabama. Forrest, with fewer than half that number, pursued Streight relentlessly for 16 days across rugged terrain. Forrest's men harried the Union column, never letting them rest. Exhausted and out of ammunition, Straight's force was cornered near Cedar Bluff. Forrest bluffed, making his small force appear much larger by marching them in circles before Streight. Convinced he was surrounded, Streight surrendered his entire command. Forrest's audacity and psychological warfare won a stunning victory against the odds. The spectacular success in capturing Streight's entire raiding force, well, it just further enhanced Forrest's already legendary status. Throughout the South, newspapers lauded this incredible feat, portraying Forrest as an invincible warrior who could achieve the impossible. His performance stood in stark contrast to the perceived failures and caution of the main army's leadership under General Bragg. While the high command seemed locked in a stalemate, Forrest was out there delivering tangible, dramatic victories. This growing fame brought him to the attention of the Confederate government in Richmond, which, recognized the need to better utilize his unique talents. In recognition of his incredible service, Nathan Bedford Forrest was promoted to the rank of Major General in July of 1863. This promotion was long overdue in the eyes of many, and it finally gave him a level of authority more in line with his battlefield achievements. With the promotion came a new command. He was given control of all the cavalry in West Tennessee and North Mississippi, a region he knew as well as any man alive. This new role gave him a degree of independence from the direct oversight of General Bragg, with whom, honestly, his relationship had become completely toxic. Forrest's new command was a formidable force, eventually designated as Forrest's Cavalry Corps. It was composed of several brigades of veteran troopers, many of whom had served with him before and were, frankly, fanatically loyal to him. He was now in his element, operating as a semi-independent commander with a clear strategic objective to defend the vital agricultural region of Mississippi and West Tennessee, and to disrupt Union operations along the Mississippi River. This was a critical assignment, since this region served as a major breadbasket for the Confederacy and was a constant source of recruits and supplies. Operating from his new headquarters, Forrest began to reorganize and re-equip his corps, turning it into the most feared mobile strike force in the Confederacy. He established his own network of spies, supply depots, and workshops to repair equipment, creating a self-sufficient military machine. He was no longer just a raider. He was the military governor of a vast and contested territory. His promotion and new command really marked a new phase in his career. He now had the rank and the resources to operate on a larger strategic scale, posing an even greater threat to Union armies in the Western theater. Despite his new independent command in Mississippi, Major General Forrest and his corps were recalled to join General Bragg's Army of Tennessee for a major offensive in September 1863. Bragg had successfully maneuvered the Union Army of the Cumberland under General William Rosecrans out of Chattanooga and saw an opportunity to destroy it. The two armies converged near Chickamauga Creek in northern Georgia, setting the stage for one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Forrest's cavalry was tasked with guarding the Army's right flank and probing the Union positions in the days leading up to the main engagement. On September 18th, Forrest's dismounted troopers crossed the creek and engaged Union cavalry, firing the opening shots of the Battle of Chickamauga. For the next 2 days, Forrest was in the thick of the fighting. His men fought primarily as infantry, holding a critical sector of the Confederate line against repeated Union assaults. Forrest was a whirlwind of activity, personally directing his brigades, rallying shaken troops, and at one point even helping to serve a cannon when its crew was shot down. His leadership was inspirational, and his sector of the line held firm against immense pressure from the enemy. On the second day of the battle, September 20th, a mistaken Union order created a gap in their line. Confederate General James Longstreet, whose corps had been sent from Virginia to reinforce Bragg, launched a massive assault into this gap, shattering the Union right wing. The Union Army collapsed, and Rosecrans and his staff fled back to Chattanooga in a full-blown panic. The only thing that prevented a complete annihilation of the Union Army was the heroic stand of General George H. Thomas, who rallied the remaining Union forces on a defensive position known as Snodgrass Hill, earning him the nickname the Rock of Chickamauga. As the Union forces retreated in disarray toward Chattanooga, Forrest saw a golden opportunity. He pushed his cavalry forward in pursuit and realized the road to Chattanooga was wide open. He sent urgent messages to Bragg, imploring him to launch an immediate full-scale pursuit to destroy the routed enemy army before it could reach the safety of the city's fortifications. He famously wrote, "Every hour is worth 1,000 men." But Bragg, ever cautious and overwhelmed by the scale of his own bloody victory, hesitated. He refused to order a pursuit, allowing the battered Union Army to escape and dig in at Chattanooga, thus squandering the greatest Confederate victory in the Western theater. General Bragg's failure to pursue and destroy the Union Army after the victory at Chickamauga was the final straw for Nathan Bedford Forrest. He was utterly enraged by what he saw as an act of stunning incompetence that had snatched defeat from the jaws of a decisive victory. The bad blood that had been simmering between the two generals for months finally boiled over. Forrest rode to Bragg's headquarters for a direct confrontation. What followed was one of the most remarkable and insubordinate exchanges between a subordinate and a commanding general in American military history. According to first-hand accounts, Forrest, face-to-face with Bragg, unleashed a torrent of abuse. He accused Bragg of cowardice and incompetence, telling him he had played the part of a damned scoundrel and had been a detriment to the Confederate cause from the beginning. He concluded his tirade by stating, "You have ruined the best army in the world. I will not serve under you another day. If you ever again try to give me an order, I will kill you." Having delivered this stunning ultimatum, Forrest turned and left. Such an act of open insubordination would normally result in an immediate court-martial and possible execution. However, Forrest's value to the Confederacy was so immense that Bragg could not afford to court-martial him. The public outcry would have been enormous. Instead, the matter was referred to Confederate President Jefferson Davis. Davis, caught between his support for Bragg and his recognition of Forrest's indispensable skills, engineered a compromise. He confirmed Forrest's recent promotion to Major General and granted his request for a new, fully independent command in his old stomping grounds of West Tennessee and North Mississippi. Forrest would be free from Bragg's authority, tasked with raising a new force from scratch in enemy-occupied territory. In late 1863, Forrest left the Army of Tennessee for good and returned to Mississippi to take up his new, daunting assignment. He started with only a handful of men, but his reputation was a powerful recruiting tool. Deserters, partisans, and new volunteers flocked to his banner, and he quickly cobbled together a new cavalry corps. This new command was uniquely his own, composed of men who had chosen to serve under him specifically. Freed from the constraints of the main army's command structure, Forrest was now a truly independent actor, a rogue general ready to unleash his own brand of warfare on the Union forces in the West. In the spring of 1864, Forrest set out on a new campaign into West Tennessee and Kentucky with his newly formed cavalry corps. His goals were to disrupt Union operations, seize much-needed supplies, and recruit fresh soldiers for his ranks. On April 12th, he reached Fort Pillow, a Union-held stronghold on the Mississippi River just north of Memphis. The fort was defended by about 600 troops, a mix of white Tennessee Unionists, seen as traitors by the Confederates, and for the first time in Forrest's experience, a significant number of African-American soldiers from the United States Colored Troops. Forrest did what he usually did, surrounding the fort and demanding its surrender to avoid a bloody fight. But the Union commander, Major Lionel F. Booth, refused to give in. Forrest's men then launched a coordinated assault, with their sharpshooters quickly gaining the upper hand and killing Major Booth. After that, command passed to Major William F. Bradford, who kept up the resistance. Forrest's troops stormed the earthworks and, well, the Union defense just fell apart. What happened next is honestly one of the most controversial and bitterly debated moments of the Civil War and of Forrest's life. As Confederate soldiers poured into the fort, the Union garrison, now in a state of panic and chaos, tried to flee down the steep river bluff toward the Mississippi, hoping for cover or rescue from a Union gunboat. According to many Union survivors and even a later congressional investigation, the Confederate soldiers, angry at the presence of black troops and their white officers, kept firing at the fleeing soldiers, even as many tried to surrender. These accounts describe a scene of indiscriminate killing, with men being shot down after throwing down their weapons and begging for quarter. On the other hand, Confederate accounts, including Forrest's own official report, told a very different story. They claimed the Union soldiers kept their weapons as they ran and kept shooting back, forcing the Confederates to keep fighting until all resistance was put down. They flatly denied any massacre of surrendering troops. The casualty numbers, though, were shockingly one-sided. The Union garrison suffered extremely high losses, with a disproportionately large number of African-American soldiers killed rather than taken prisoner. Whether it was a deliberate massacre ordered or allowed by Forrest, or just a battle that spun out of control in the heat of the moment, the Fort Pillow massacre became a rallying cry in the North and left a permanent stain on Forrest's reputation. After the horror and controversy of Fort Pillow, Union commanders in the West were determined to find Forrest and put an end to his command once and for all. So, in June of 1864, a formidable Union force, more than 8,000 infantry and cavalry, led by General Samuel D. Sturgis, set out from Memphis, heading into northern Mississippi with the clear goal of destroying Forrest. Sturgis's army was well equipped and had a big advantage in numbers, while Forrest could only muster about 3,500 troopers to meet this invasion. On paper, the Union side should have steamrolled the Confederates, but Forrest, always the master of choosing his ground, picked the time and place for battle carefully. He decided to meet Sturgis at a small rural crossroads called Brice's Crossroads on June 10, 1864. The area was a tangle of muddy roads and thick woods, making it tough for the larger Union army to use its numbers and artillery. Forrest planned to hit the Union column while it was stretched out on the march, aiming to defeat the cavalry before the infantry could even get into position. The weather was also brutal. It was a scorching, humid day that would sap the strength of the marching Union soldiers. As the Union cavalry vanguard neared the crossroads, Forrest struck with his whole force, hitting them from the front and both flanks at once, throwing them into chaos. The Union cavalry was routed just as their infantry, worn out from a fast 5-mile march in the heat, began arriving in bits and pieces. Forrest didn't give them a chance to form a solid line. He sent his men in, fighting dismounted, against the tired and scattered Union infantry as they came up. The result was a stunning and total victory for Forrest. The Union line broke, and the retreat quickly turned into a panicked rout. Forrest's men chased the fleeing Union soldiers for miles, capturing their entire artillery train, 16 cannons, more than 170 supply wagons, and taking over 1,500 prisoners. Sturgis's powerful army was basically wiped out as a fighting force. Brice's Crossroads is still seen by many military historians as Forrest's tactical masterpiece, a perfect example of a smaller, more mobile force, led by a brilliant commander, utterly smashing a larger and better equipped opponent. It really was the high point of his military career. After his stunning raid on Memphis, Nathan Bedford Forrest's cavalry fought bravely in the Confederacy's final campaigns, but defeat was inevitable. Outnumbered and outgunned, Forrest's forces fell at Selma. On May 9, 1865, Forrest surrendered, urging his men to accept defeat and return home as citizens. The war was over. Nathan Bedford Forrest returned to a shattered South, his fortune gone, plantations ruined, and the old way of life destroyed. Like many Southerners, he tried to rebuild, leasing land and working with freedmen, but the world had changed forever. Forrest poured his energy into new ventures, but faced constant struggle and debt in a South transformed by war and loss. In the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, the South was placed under military occupation and subjected to a period of federal control known as Reconstruction. This era brought about revolutionary changes, including the enfranchisement of African American men and the rise of Republican-led state governments supported by black voters. For many white Southerners, who had just fought a brutal war to maintain a system of white supremacy, these developments were seen as a humiliating and, unnatural overturning of their society. They deeply resented the presence of Union troops, the authority of so-called carpetbagger officials from the North, and the political empowerment of their former slaves. It was in this climate of bitterness and resistance that the Ku Klux Klan was born. In late 1865, in the small town of Pulaski, Tennessee, 6 young Confederate veterans, bored and just looking for amusement, formed a secret social club. They came up with mysterious rituals, adopted strange titles for their officers, and created ghostly costumes made up of white robes and masks. Their initial activities were, honestly, relatively harmless pranks and midnight rides meant to frighten the local populace and create an air of mystery. They called their new society the Ku Klux Klan, a name that came from the Greek word kyklos, meaning circle, and the word clan. The Klan's activities, though, quickly took on a more sinister and political purpose. White Southerners soon discovered that the Klan's ghostly disguises were a highly effective tool for intimidating newly freed African Americans and their white Republican allies. The midnight rides, which had started as pranks, evolved into targeted campaigns of terror aimed at suppressing the black vote and undermining the authority of Reconstruction governments. The Klan began to spread rapidly across the South, transforming from a single local club into a decentralized network of secret dens that shared a common ideology and a common set of violent tactics. As the Klan grew in numbers and influence, it began to attract men from all levels of white society, including prominent planners, businessmen, and former Confederate officers. They didn't see the Klan as a terrorist group, but as a patriotic organization, kind of an underground resistance movement dedicated to redeeming the South from what they considered to be illegitimate rule. They believed they were protecting white womanhood, reestablishing social order, and fighting back against a political system they saw as corrupt and oppressive. The small social club from Pulaski had tapped into a deep well of white Southern anger and was morphing into a powerful and violent paramilitary force. In 1867, the Ku Klux Klan chose Confederate hero Nathan Bedford Forrest as its first Grand Wizard, giving the group a powerful, unifying leader. His name brought legitimacy and fear, making the Klan a force in the South during Reconstruction. Forrest's leadership marked the Klan's rise and its infamy. Led by Nathan Bedford Forrest, the Ku Klux Klan unleashed a reign of terror across the South, targeting black voters, leaders, and their allies to restore white supremacy. Under cover of darkness, Klansmen used violence, whippings, arson, and murder to intimidate and silence. On election days, armed Klansmen blocked black voters, crushing political rights and spreading fear. The Klan's violence subverted democracy, rolling back hard-won freedoms during Reconstruction. By 1869, the Ku Klux Klan's extreme violence had begun to spiral out of control, becoming a liability even for some of its original proponents. The decentralized nature of the organization meant that Forrest and other high-level leaders had little practical control over the actions of local dens. These groups often devolved into gangs of thugs who used the Klan's authority to settle personal vendettas, commit robberies, or engage in random acts of cruelty that, honestly, had little to do with the Klan's original political objectives. The widespread lawlessness was creating chaos and giving the federal government a powerful reason to intervene more forcefully in Southern affairs. Nathan Bedford Forrest himself grew disillusioned with the organization he led. According to his own later testimony, he had intended the Klan to be a disciplined, defensive organization, a protective force to counter the influence of the Republican loyalties. He had not intended for it to become a vehicle for widespread, indiscriminate violence and criminality. Seeing that the Klan's actions were becoming counterproductive and were inviting federal suppression, Forrest decided that the organization had outlived its usefulness. He recognized that its continued existence would only bring more hardship and federal scrutiny upon the South. In January 1869, Forrest issued what is known as General Order No. 1, his official command as Grand Wizard to disband the Ku Klux Klan. In this order, he instructed all members to burn their robes and destroy all other Klan paraphernalia. He declared that the immediate purpose of the organization, to counter a perceived state of anarchy, had been achieved, and that its secret, masked activities should cease. He argued that the time for such methods had passed and that public peace could now be better maintained through open and legal channels. With this order, the man who had been the Klan's supreme leader officially commanded its dissolution. However, Forrest's order had limited practical effect. While he may have formally resigned his leadership and commanded the Klan to disband, the organization had grown far beyond the control of any single individual. Many local dens simply ignored the Grand Wizard's decree and continued their campaigns of terror for several more years. The violence became so severe that it prompted the United States Congress to pass the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which gave the federal government sweeping powers to use the military to suppress the organization and prosecute its members. Forrest's attempt to disband the Klan was too little, too late to stop the wave of violence he had helped to legitimize. After leaving the Ku Klux Klan, Nathan Bedford Forrest tried to rebuild his life as a businessman, never regaining his old wealth. In his final years, Forrest surprised many by publicly advocating for racial harmony and black civil rights. Whatever his motives, Forrest's last acts called for reconciliation and mutual respect in a new South. In 1875, he attended a barbecue hosted by the Independent Order of Pole Bearers, a prominent African-American group in Memphis. Forrest addressed the crowd, urging black and white Southerners to live together in peace and work for shared prosperity. A young black woman presented him flowers. Forrest accepted and kissed her cheek, stunning the community. His actions drew both praise and outrage, marking a pivotal, complex moment in his legacy. After Reconstruction, Forrest tried to secure his family's future, turning to a convict lease plantation on President's Island. Despite declining health from old wounds and illness, he managed the land with a firm but fair hand, relying more on his son. In his final years, Forrest grew more reflective, seeking spiritual peace. Nathan Bedford Forrest, a man of action, found faith late in life as illness set in. Supported by his devout wife, he joined the church, seeking peace and redemption. In 1877, with family by his side, Forrest died at 56, his funeral drawing thousands, his legacy still debated today. After his death, Nathan Bedford Forrest became a mythic hero of the lost cause, celebrated as a military genius and Southern icon. His leadership of the Ku Klux Klan and slave trading were downplayed, while monuments and schools honored his name. This myth served to uphold white supremacy, making Forrest's legacy deeply contested for generations. In the modern era, Nathan Bedford Forrest's legacy faces fierce debate. Once celebrated, he's now seen by many as a symbol of white supremacy and violence. Statues fall, names change, and his memory divides communities. A legacy still fiercely contested today. Nathan Bedford Forrest's life is a paradox: military genius and terror, family man and slave trader, a figure of violence who later preached peace. His legacy is fiercely debated, hero to some, villain to others, reflecting America's ongoing struggle with its own history.